The Silent Scream Commander Sarah Chon had been staring at the same data stream for 3 hours when the impossible happened. The coffee in her mug had gone cold twice, and the night shift at Deep Space Station Alpha was usually quiet enough too. Hear the hum of the life support systems. But tonight, the sensors were picking up something that made her question everything she thought she knew about the universe. The energy signature appeared on her screens like a ghost materializing from the void. It was massive, moving at incredible speed and heading directly toward Earth's solar system. Sarah's trained eyes swept across the readings, analyzing trajectory, velocity, and power output. Whatever this thing was, it was bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Martinez, come look at this, Sarah called to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Carlos Martinez. The young officer hurried over from the communications console, his face showing the same mixture of exhaustion and alertness that came with deep space duty. Carlos studied the display, his eyebrows rising with each passing second. Commander, these readings don't match any known ship design. The energy pattern is completely foreign. And look at this. He pointed to a section of the data. It's not maintaining a steady course. The ship appears to be tumbling. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In her 15 years of monitoring deep space, she had never seen anything like this. The object was clearly artificial, but its erratic movement suggested something was very wrong. Contact Earth Command immediately. Priority Alpha. And Martinez, wake up the entire analysis team. We need to figure out what we're dealing with. Within minutes, the station buzzed with activity. Scientists, linguists, and military advisors gathered around the main display, watching as the mysterious object continued its approach toward Jupiter's orbit. Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief xenolinguist, arrived still wearing his sleep clothes but carrying a tablet full of analysis software. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases, reported Dr. Lisa Park, the station's physicist. But I'm detecting patterns that suggest advanced technology. This isn't natural phenomena, Commander. Someone built this. As the object drew closer, the station's powerful telescopes began to resolve its shape. What they saw left everyone speechless. The ship was enormous, perhaps 10 kilometers long, with a design that seemed to flow like liquid metal. But it was clearly damaged. Pieces of the hull were missing, and strange energy discharges flickered across its surface like lightning in a storm. It's beautiful, whispered Dr. Webb, his eyes wide with wonder. And it's dying. The ship suddenly changed course, turning toward Jupiter with what appeared to be its last reserves of power. Emergency signals began broadcasting on frequencies that human technology had never encountered before. The signals were complex, mathematical, and filled with what could only be described as desperation. They're trying to communicate, Dr. Webb announced, his fingers flying across his tablet as he began the process of translation. These patterns, they're not random. There's structure here, grammar, syntax. This is definitely a language. Sarah watched the damaged ship settle into orbit around Jupiter, its hull glowing with the planet's reflected light. Whoever was inside. That vessel had traveled an unimaginable distance to reach this place. The question was wide out over the next 6 hours. Dr. Webb worked tirelessly to decode the alien signals. His team of linguists and mathematicians joined the effort, using every tool and technique they had developed for theoretical first contact scenarios. The breakthrough came when they realized the signals contained mathematical constants that were universal, creating a foundation for translation. Commander, Dr. Webb said, his voice shaking with excitement and fear, I think I understand what they're trying to say. But you're not going to like it. Sarah gathered the senior staff around. The main conference table. Dr. Webb's face was pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he prepared his report. The beings on that ship call themselves the Kitharin. They're refugees from a war that has consumed their entire region of the galaxy. They've been fleeing for months, and their ship is dying. He paused, looking around the room at the faces of his colleagues. But that's not the worst part. They're being hunted by something called the Void Hunters. According to their message, these Void Hunters had destroyed hundreds of star systems, wiping out entire civilizations. They consume everything in their path, leaving nothing but empty space behind. The room fell silent. Sarah felt the weight of the revelation settling on her shoulders. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe, but they had never imagined that first contact would come with such terrifying news. There's more, Dr. Webb continued. The Kitharin have been monitoring our radio signals for decades. They know about our military capabilities, our wars, our technology. They've come here because they believe we might be able to help them. They're asking for our assistance in fighting the Void Hunters. Lieutenant Martinez leaned forward. Help them? Commander, we don't even know if their story is true. This could be an invasion force trying to trick us. Sarah considered this possibility, but something about the damaged ship and the desperate tone of the transmissions convinced her otherwise. Dr. Webb, is there any way we can communicate with them directly? We need to know more. I've been working on that, Dr. Webb replied. I think I can establish basic communication using mathematical principles. But Commander, there's something else. The Kitharin ship is failing. They have perhaps days before their life support completely breaks down. If we're going to help them, we need to act quickly. Sarah made a decision that would change the course of human history. Martinez, contact Earth Command. Tell them we need an emergency council meeting, and Dr. Webb, open a channel to that ship. It's time we introduced ourselves to the galaxy. The first direct communication between humanity and an alien species. Lasted only minutes, but it was enough to confirm Dr. Webb's translation. The Kitharin were indeed refugees, and their story of the Void Hunters was terrifyingly real. The alien ambassador, who identified himself as Zethkar, transmitted star charts showing the path of destruction across dozens of star systems. Earth Command's response came within hours. Admiral Rebecca Stone, a veteran of the Titan Wars, and Earth's most experienced fleet commander, was given emergency authority to respond to the crisis. Her message to Station Alpha was brief and direct. Bring the aliens to Earth. We need to understand what we're dealing with. The rescue operation took place in the shadow of Jupiter's great red spot. Human ships approached the dying Kitharin. Vessel carefully, using magnetic clamps and emergency airlocks to transfer the surviving aliens to safety. There were only 12 Kitharin left from a crew of thousands, and their ship's final systems failed just hours after the rescue was complete. Zethkar was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shift color based on his emotions. His large eyes held depths of sadness that spoke of losses beyond human comprehension. When he spoke to the assembled leaders of Earth, his voice carried the weight of his extinct civilization. We are the last of our kind, he said through Dr. Webb's translation. System. The Void Hunters consumed our worlds, our people, our history. We carry with us the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations that no longer exist. But we also carry hope, because we have found you. Asterisk. The emergency session of the United Earth Council lasted 3 days. Representatives from every nation debated the implications of Zethkar's request. The Kitharin offered to share their advanced technology in exchange for military assistance against the Void Hunters. Their ships could travel faster than light. Their weapons could manipulate matter at the quantum level, and their defensive systems could bend space itself. But the price was enormous. The Void Hunters were already moving toward Earth's region of the galaxy. Whether humanity helped the Kitharin or not, the enemy would eventually arrive. The choice was whether to meet them as allies with advanced technology or as isolated targets with only human weapons. General David Cross, Earth's top military strategist, presented the military assessment. The Kytheran technology gives us advantages we never dreamed possible. But we're talking about an enemy that has destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours. This isn't just about helping refugees. This is about the survival of our species. President Elena Vasquez made the final decision. We cannot stand by while innocent beings are slaughtered. But more than that, we cannot ignore the threat to our own world. We will help the Kytheran, and we will prepare for war. The mobilization began immediately. Shipyards across the solar system worked around the clock to retrofit human vessels with Kytheran technology. The process was complicated by the fundamental differences between human and alien engineering, but human ingenuity found ways to make it work. Admiral Stone took command of the combined fleet. Her flagship, the U.E.'s Defiance, was a massive battleship that had been transformed by Kytheran upgrades. Its hull now shimmed with energy shields. Its engines could fold space for faster than light travel, and its weapon systems could fire projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The fleet that assembled at Mars was unlike anything in human history. 500 ships of every class, from massive dreadnoughts to small fighters, all enhanced with alien technology. 50,000 of humanity's best soldiers, pilots, and officers volunteered for the mission, knowing they might never return home. Zethkar worked closely with the human commanders, sharing tactical knowledge about the Void Hunters. The enemy was a collective consciousness that controlled vast fleets of identical ships. They fought with perfect coordination, but lacked the flexibility and creativity that characterized human warfare. They think in patterns, Zethkar explained to Admiral Stone. They calculate the most efficient way to destroy their enemies and then execute that plan perfectly. But humans, I have observed, do not think in patterns. You improvise, adapt, and surprise even yourselves. This may be the key to victory. On the 5th day after first contact, the human fleet prepared to depart for Kytheran space. The journey would take 3 weeks through hyperspace corridors that the Kytheran had mapped over centuries of exploration. At the destination, they would face an enemy that had never been defeated in battle. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking out at the fleet that spread across Mars' orbit like a constellation of stars. Each ship represented humanity's commitment to helping strangers in need, even at great risk to themselves. All ships, this is Admiral Stone, she announced over the fleet communications. We go into the unknown to face an enemy that has terrorized the galaxy for generations. But we do not go alone. We carry with us the hopes of all free beings, and we carry the strength that comes from doing what is right. The fleet engaged, their hyperspace engines simultaneously, creating a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from Earth. In an instant, they were gone, racing through folded space toward a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Behind them, Earth continued its rotation, its people looking up at the stars with new knowledge. They were no longer alone in the universe, and they had chosen to stand with those who needed help. The outcome of that choice would echo through the cosmos for generations to come. Thunder in the Void, the hyperspace journey to Kytheran space, took the human fleet through regions of the galaxy that no Earth-born eyes had ever seen. Admiral Rebecca Stone walked the corridors of the U.E.'s Defiance, checking on her crew and studying the alien star charts that Zethkar had provided. Each system they passed told a story of destruction and loss. Captain Maria Rodriguez commanded the fighter squadrons from her ship, the carrier Hughes Thunderbolt. She was known throughout the fleet for her unconventional tactics and her ability to think 3 steps ahead of any enemy. Her pilots trusted her completely, even when her orders seemed to defy all military logic. Rodriguez, Admiral Stone called over the communication system. Bring your wing commanders to the main briefing room. We need to discuss what we're going to face when we arrive." The briefing room was filled with the soft blue glow of Kithran holographic displays. Lieutenant Commander James Park, the fleet's specialist in alien technology, stood beside projections of destroyed star systems. Each image showed the same pattern: planets stripped of all resources, stars dimmed by massive energy drains, and empty space where civilizations had once thrived. "The Void Hunters operate with perfect efficiency," Park explained to the assembled officers. "They arrive in a system, establish a perimeter, and then systematically consume everything. They don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, and they don't leave anything behind." Zethkar's image appeared in the hologram, his skin shifting to darker colors as he spoke of his people's ordeal. "We fought them for 6 months before our defenses failed. They learned from every battle, adapting their tactics to counter whatever strategies we used. By the end, they knew our weapons better than we did." Chief Engineer Anna Volkov raised her hand. She had been working tirelessly to integrate human and Kithran technology, creating hybrid systems that neither species had imagined possible. "Zethkar, you mentioned that the Void Hunters think in patterns. What happens when they encounter something completely new?" The alien ambassador considered this question carefully. "In our observations, they pause. They study the new element, analyze it, and then develop countermeasures. But there is always a delay, sometimes lasting several minutes. In space combat, minutes can be decisive." Admiral Stone felt a plan beginning to form in her mind. Human military doctrine emphasized flexibility and surprise, qualities that had apparently been lacking in the Kithran's defensive strategy. "How long until we reach your home system?" 2 days, Zethkar replied. "But Admiral, you should know that long-range sensors detected the Void Hunters' main fleet moving toward that area. They may have already begun their final assault." The next 2 days passed in intense preparation. Human engineers worked with Kithran survivors to modify weapon systems, improve defensive capabilities, and create new tactical options. The collaboration produced innovations that surprised both species. Anna Volkov discovered that human plasma weapons could be enhanced with Kithran energy crystals, creating projectiles that could phase through enemy shields. Captain Rodriguez developed fighter formations that used Kithran cloaking technology to appear and disappear in the middle of dogfights. Lieutenant Commander Park found ways to use the alien navigation systems to make ships appear in multiple locations simultaneously. When the fleet finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kithran system, they found a battle already in progress. The surviving Kithran defense forces were making a desperate last stand around their homeworld, their beautiful crystal ships firing brilliant beams of energy at the approaching Void Hunter fleet. That the enemy ships were unlike anything in human experience. They were perfectly geometric, with no unnecessary curves or decorations. Each vessel was identical to the others, creating a formation that moved with mechanical precision. Their weapons fired in perfect synchronization, creating devastating barrages that overwhelmed the Kithran defenses. "My God," whispered Captain Rodriguez as she watched Kithran ships explode in brilliant flashes of light. "There are thousands of them." Admiral Stone studied the tactical display with growing concern. The Void Hunter fleet was 3 times larger than the human force, and their weapons appeared to be more advanced than anything in either human or Kithran arsenal. But she had not come this far to retreat at the first sign of difficulty. "All ships, this is Admiral Stone. We didn't travel across the galaxy to watch from the sidelines. Battle stations, we're going in." The human fleet moved into attack formation, but their approach was deliberately chaotic. Instead of the neat formations that characterized both Kithran and Void Hunter tactics, the human ships spread out in seemingly random patterns. Some moved fast, others slow. Some flew in straight lines, others in spirals and loops. The Void Hunters detected the approaching fleet immediately. Their response was swift and calculated. A portion of their force turned to face the new threat, weapons charging with lethal energy. But when they fired, most of their shots missed their targets completely. "They're calculating our flight paths based on standard tactical doctrine," reported Lieutenant Commander Park from the tactical station. "But we're not following standard doctrine." Captain Rodriguez led her fighter squadrons in the first wave of attacks. Her ships moved like a swarm of angry insects, diving and weaving between the massive enemy vessels. The Void Hunters tried to target them, but the human pilots refused to fly in predictable patterns. "Rodriguez to all fighters," she transmitted. "Remember, we're not trying to win a dogfight. We're trying to confuse them. Make them think, make them hesitate, make them doubt their calculations." The strategy worked better than anyone had hoped. The Void Hunters, accustomed to enemies that fought with mathematical precision, found themselves unable to predict human movements. Their perfect coordination began to break down as different ships attempted to counter different perceived threats. Chief Engineer Volkov had prepared a special surprise for the enemy. She had modified UE's Defiance's main weapons to fire projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When the flagship opened fire, its shots passed through the Void Hunter's shields as if they weren't there. Asterisk, asterisk. The enemy responded by adapting their shield frequency, but Volkov was ready for that too. She had prepared 12 different dimensional configurations, each one designed to counter their countermeasures. The Void Hunters found themselves in a technological arms race that changed every few minutes. "They're trying to analyze our weapons," Park reported, "but they can't keep up with our modifications." The battle raged for hours. Human ships darted between the massive enemy vessels, firing hybrid weapons that combined human innovation with Kithran technology. The Void Hunters' perfect formations began to show gaps as ships were destroyed or damaged by attacks they couldn't predict. But the enemy's greatest strength was their numbers. For every Void Hunter ship that was destroyed, 2 more took its place. The human fleet was winning individual engagements, but they were slowly being overwhelmed by the sheer size of the enemy force. "Admiral," called Captain Rodriguez over the communication system, "we need to do something about their command structure. They're starting to adapt to our tactics." Admiral Stone had been thinking the same thing. The Void Hunters were learning, just as Zethkar had warned. Soon, their adaptation would overcome human unpredictability. But she had noticed something important about the enemy fleet structure. Park analyzed their communication patterns. "I want to know how they're coordinating their attacks." The tactical officer worked rapidly, his fingers flying across the alien. "Control systems. Admiral, they're using a central command node. It's that massive ship in the center of their formation. All tactical decisions are flowing through that single point." "Then that's our target," Stone decided. "All ships converge on the enemy command vessel. Maximum firepower, full attack." The human fleet reformed into a spearhead formation, driving straight toward the heart of the enemy fleet. The Void Hunters recognized the threat immediately and moved to intercept, but their response was hampered by the same rigid thinking that had plagued them throughout the battle. They calculated the most efficient way to stop the human attack, and positioned their ships accordingly. But humans rarely chose the most efficient path. Admiral Stone's fleet suddenly scattered in all directions, each ship taking a different route toward the command vessel. The Void Hunters found themselves trying to defend against attacks from dozens of different angles simultaneously. Their perfect coordination became a liability as ships collided with each other trying to respond to multiple threats. In the chaos of the final assault, Chief Engineer Volkov unleashed her most ambitious creation. She had modified the HFY's hyperspace drive to create a localized space-time distortion. When activated, it caused the enemy command ship to exist in several different locations at once. The effect was devastating. The Void Hunter command vessel's own weapons began firing at different versions of itself, creating a cascade of explosions that tore the ship apart from within. The destruction of the command node sent shock waves through the entire enemy fleet. Without their central coordination, the Void Hunter's perfect formation collapsed. Individual ships began operating independently, making them vulnerable to the human tactics that had been so effective throughout the battle. The tide of war had turned. Captain Rodriguez pressed her advantage, leading her fighters in surgical strikes against the confused enemy vessels. Lieutenant Commander Park coordinated the fleet's attacks, using the alien sensors to identify and target the most important enemy ships. The Void Hunters attempted to retreat, but their rigid thinking made them predictable, even in defeat. They withdrew in perfect formation, making them easy targets for the pursuing human fleet. By the time the battle ended, less than a quarter of the enemy force had escaped. The Kytheran homeworld was saved, but the victory came at a cost. The human fleet had lost nearly a third of its ships, and thousands of brave men and women would never return to Earth. But they had achieved something that no other species had managed. They had defeated the Void Hunters in open battle. Zethkar's people emerged from their shelters to find their world still intact. The surviving Kytheran looked up at the human ships with wonder and gratitude. They had witnessed something unprecedented, a species that had chosen to risk everything to help strangers in need. "Your people are remarkable," Zethkar told Admiral Stone as they stood in the ruins of the Kytheran capital. "You came to our aid when you had no obligation to do so. You fought an enemy that had never been defeated, and you won through courage and creativity." Admiral Stone looked out at the damaged but still beautiful Kytheran world. "We did what was right, and we learned something important about ourselves in the process." The human fleet began its journey home, carrying with them the knowledge that they were no longer alone in the universe. They had found allies among the stars, and they had proven that human determination could overcome any obstacle. But more importantly, they had shown the galaxy that there were still beings willing to fight for justice, even when the odds seemed impossible. The Void Hunters had been defeated, but the bonds forged in battle would last forever. As the ships entered hyperspace for the long journey back to Earth, Admiral Stone reflected on the lessons of the campaign. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible challenges. Now, they had proven that their best was good enough to save the galaxy itself. The war was over, but the friendship between humanity and the Kytheran was just beginning. Together, they would rebuild what had been destroyed and explore the wonders of the universe. The silent scream for help had been answered with thunder in the void, and the galaxy was safer for it.